in the back alleys and by jihadis. And these were very dangerous men who had absolutely no moral compunctions at all. They had kidnapped, what was known was that they had kidnapped the director of the station chief of the CIA, and they had beat him to death so badly that they beat him with bricks, concrete, chains. They electrocuted him.
Is this before you were there?
I'm sorry?
Is this before you ever got there? Or had you been there?
This was my CIA handler, Dr. Richard Fuisz's project.
Okay.
And so my CIA handler, Dr. Richard Fuisz, was involved in rescuing the hostages. And at first, before they could rescue them, they had to find out where they were. And so within the intelligence community, a faction, and I must say that my CIA handler, Dr. Richard Fuisz, was opposed to this, and he condemned it. But he was one of the very few people who was willing to go on record saying that it happened. And he said that a faction of the CIA team was trying to infiltrate the kidnappers, and they got involved in heroin trafficking out of the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon. And so they were taking some of the profits. They were taking the profits from the heroin trafficking,
of course,
and that was starting to fund. They were getting addicted to this money, this easy drug money, and so Lockerbie was actually when a defense intelligence team, a competing intelligence agency, also had a team there. Everybody was trying to find the hostages, and those guys said, "You are going to stop doing this, and we're reporting you to Washington. We demand that and so." The CIA team of 3 men and the Defense Intelligence Agency of 3 men all got on the same airplane to fly back to Washington, D.C. to give a report on the CIA heroin trafficking to Langley. And the terrorists blew up the plane so that they would never make it back to protect their drug cartel. That is the story of Lockerbie.
Now, is any of that...
It's a movie. It's a movie, but that's
so all that is out.
All
that's out. Everybody knows this now that wants to know this, that has looked it up. This is nothing new. This was your work before that you helped? Because I keep reading about this and I don't know about it yet, but I keep hearing about the Lockerbie thing.
Yeah.
And your connection with that.
Yeah.
So.
And so I was involved in when I first made contact with Libya in May of 1995, I was involved in starting talks for the Lockerbie trial. Because what happened was the United States the United States and the United Nations imposed sanctions on Libya, demanding that Libya turn over 2 men that the United States claimed had been involved in the attack. Gaddafi said, no, these men have nothing to do with it, and you know that, and the fact that you will not go after the men who really did it shows that this is going to be a scam and a con, and you're going to, it's a stacked case, it's a rigged case because you don't like us because we're Libyan, and I'm not going to turn over my men to you. I'm just not going to hand them over to you. And so the United States put the sanctions on. So what we did was my team was involved in the talks, and we recognized that Libya was innocent, but we had to guarantee that Libya would have access to information. It was a very tricky situation. We had to persuade Libya to go ahead with the trial, and we had to persuade the Justice Department and the CIA that they would have to release evidence that would allow Libya to have a fair trial. So I was making, I was working on all those things, persuading Libya and demanding that the intelligence community open the records so that there would be a fair trial. And that's what I did. And it was a lot of work. It was extremely difficult to do. It was, but anyway, but it's important because this was about heroin trafficking out of the Bekaa. And that was my first country. Libya was my first country. Iraq was my second. And Iraq was, I made contact with the United Nations Embassy in August of 1996. And I covered them for 7 years on anti-terrorism. And we had great success with Saddam throughout the 1990s. In fact, Saddam was one of our best sources on terrorism.
Yeah, that's what I'm reading, that that Iraq at the time was the center, like the source for
Yeah.
what for information, and
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
makes sense because he ruled that area and he ruled it with an iron fist. People were scared of him.
And he was obsessively tracking these fundamentalists. He saw Islamic fundamentalists
As a threat to him.
As a threatening force. And he was very much afraid that they were going to try to destabilize the Iraqi people under the sanctions were highly impoverished, as we all know. The society had been wrecked by the sanctions. And so he was very paranoid, and legitimately so, that these jihadis were going to come in and take advantage of the poverty of the people, and they were going to destabilize his regime. And so he did everything he could to get them labeled terrorists.
So help me here.
He was worse than Dick Cheney.
So help me here with your detractors, okay?
Okay.
Help me to understand what happened then. Why was he? Is it truly? I mean, what did they just want the oil all along, and they put him there so they could get the oil 10 years, 20 years later, whatever it is? I mean, what's the story? Why did they go after him, and why was he?
I think he was a huge threat to Israel. A lot of people have different opinions on Israel, and some people, really have decided they hate the Israelis, and some people are, in love with the Israelis.
Well, there's a lot of stuff.
As like the chosen people.
If you want to find the information, you can find it. Yes, you can.
That's right. But Saddam was a deep enemy of Israel and wanted to do everything he could to tear down the Israeli government. And so it is my opinion that the Iraqi war that we're in right now, that we're engaged in, was a war to help Israel and to facilitate Israel's agenda of eliminating this enemy in the Middle East. And what they have failed to understand was that if you replace Saddam Hussein, you're going to find somebody else who's right behind him who hates Israel just as much.
Who may be worse.
That's the region. That's throughout the whole region.
Right. Well, that goes back to, and I mean, this isn't my dad's story, but I just think it's so funny that, again, I'm going to pull up my dad's what he ran on, and he had a 4-point peace process, and one of them was to get people like Jimmy Carter, which a lot of people have problems with Carter, that, his connections with...
I love Jimmy Carter.
Well, when I was 4 years old, I walked into the Capitol in Georgia, and I was standing outside of his office, and my dad was running against Sam Nunn at the time for the U.S. Senate seat, and I think Sam Nunn won it that year. It was in 1972. And I remember I was standing outside. I was born in 1967, and I'm standing outside his office, and he signals for us to come in. He does a little signal thing, and I come in. I said, and I remember it to this day. I looked at him. I said, "I know who you are. You're Jimmy Carter. You're the governor." And he picked me up and held me, and he was like, "Oh, you're so cute," and all that. And I also flew on an airplane with Hosea Williams, fell asleep in his lap. I'm sure a lot of people hate me now. Love me too, but that was my dad. He was a very hardcore peace, Democrat, liberal, bleeding heart liberal. He wanted there to be more money he wanted the money to be taken out of the military industrial complex and maybe take a fifth of that and put that into the CIA.
Oh, well, I would say that we should definitely take out money from the military and complex and put it back into education and school, and domestic projects.
But he believed that intelligence was the key, and I just think that I don't want you to miss that connection. That I saw that a long time ago in you, and and that my dad, maybe he was a little bit smarter than I thought, and maybe he just didn't know. See, he was the kind of person that didn't believe in... He thinks, or thought, because he passed a few years ago, but he fought in 90 or 5 years ago. I forget what year we're in already. I don't even want to know. Anyway, so I guess what was that? 2006. He passed, and I want to believe to this day he passed because he got cancer because he hated what was happening in the political arena and could not stand it so much that he just got cancer. I believe it because
it made him sick.
It made him sick. It literally did. He had so much hate in his heart for George Bush, and I mean, I don't hate anybody. I try my best not to hate people, but I don't approve in what has been done. And he believed that if we just kept our lines of communication open, and if we put more money into intelligence and less money into the military-industrial complex, more money into intelligence, into smart intelligence, not just any old intelligence, but the kind of intelligence that JFK wanted.
Yes, yeah. I understand what you mean. And during the 1990s, that was the kind of intelligence that we tried to emulate. It was proactive, it was problem solving. I have to say that a lot of people hate Hillary Clinton, but if you focus on Bill Clinton did some things right, and he like the stuff with Iraq. The Clinton administration was never soft on Iraq. They were tough on Iraq.
Hey, even
but
Bush
they
Sr.
also were very smart to have a back channel of communication open so that we could get anything we could from Baghdad that would help us with anti-terrorism. And he did he did authorize us to work to get the weapons inspectors back into Iraq, and we just, it was a totally different mentality of it was my CIA handler and Richard Fuisz and Paul Hoven, my defense intelligence handler, definitely saw themselves as protecting American interests. They are not soft people.
Well, hey,
I have to tell you that.
Will you do me a favor?
Soft people.
Will you do me a favor, and will you let my listeners know, especially my wife, that there's hope out there based on what you know?
Well, I'll tell you something. Yes, there is. There's a lot of hope.
That there are good people still. That there are still good people out there trying their best to do what they can.
Let me give you an example of hope, of real hope. People think that the Iraqi conflict was, that it was an all-or-nothing deal where you could either have war or you had to continue the status quo. That is wrong. Through dialogue, we had built a comprehensive peace framework. And again, this was dictated by the CIA. They're not soft people. I am soft. I am the peace activist, and I wanted the sanctions to be lifted because I cared deeply about the suffering of the Iraqi people. And I would have loved your father. Your father and I would have had a very good time together. We could have had a good cup of coffee together. We would have been great. But these people were not the people who were supervising me. Were not just allowing me to go off and do things for myself and for my own agenda. They were demanding that the things that I did had to achieve results for the United States. So here's what we came up with, and here's what the Iraqis agreed to. They agreed to weapons inspections with no conditions, meaning the United States would have an authorization to go everywhere they wanted to go.
And I remember that.
That was something we negotiated that. I personally sat down with on numerous occasions.
With Tariq? Did you sit down with Tariq Aziz?
No. I was dealing with in New York with the senior diplomats at the United Nations, and I was dealing with the ambassador to the United Nations, Saeed Hassan, who then became deputy foreign minister of Iraq.
So let me ask you this. Okay. I don't want to stop you here, but I just have to know. Do you believe that these people that were running the government over there, that the media just basically painted a light on them that we could paint on anyone? On any politician, just about.
Yeah, you can. One of the things that I have found is that the corporate media has very little truth in it at all. It's just like they rely on stereotypes. They take easy shortcuts. They don't dig too deep. They don't look very far. They just want
ratings. They just want ratings. It's that simple. They want ratings so they can get the money from the people that support them, from their sponsors. It's that simple. At the end of the day, that's what they